Part 14, The Truth About Jesus Christ. There are many theories, speculations, assumptions, claims about Jesus Christ, none of which have been factually confirmed or documented, because there are no valid records or evidence. So how can we know the truth about Jesus Christ? Very simple. Through spiritual development, we can reach a low frequency of brainwaves, create pure contact with spiritual energies, and obtain all the original knowledge and truth that is written in every part of the cosmos. Everything else can only be speculations and assumptions. We convey to you a part of the sayings from spiritual energies with the topic, The Truth About Jesus Christ, by Ljubisa Stojanovic, who received this information back in 1996 and transferred the sayings received into the book, Enlightenment. The Truth About Jesus Christ, Spiritual Being, 1996. Never in human history, in such a small area, have there been so many negative thoughts as in the territory of Palestine, the culmination of which was during the last couple of centuries before Christ. These negative thoughts, such as fear for life, hatred, grief, dissatisfaction, were the result of the suffering, despair and hopelessness of the Jewish and other people enslaved by the Roman Empire, as well as the numerous wars that were fought in that territory. The consequence of this enormous development of negative thoughts was severe damage to the lower layer of the Earth's aura, which threatened to result in cataclysms in the form of earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, harmful radiation and toxic gases, on the largest part of the planet, which would destroy almost all plant and animal life and people, so the survival of the planet itself would be called into question. In order to eliminate this danger, it was necessary to carry out two activities. 1. That with the powerful energy of spiritual beings, the aura of the earth is repaired and brought to a normal state, without damaging the living world on earth. 2. The second activity is preventive and related to finding methods that would lead to a change in the way of thinking of the people of that time in the direction of reducing negative thoughts and creating as many positive thoughts as possible. The basic problem for the realization of this second task was the existence of free human will, which had to be respected. For this reason, work on changing the way of thinking in a positive direction required action with a larger number of people in order to create a positive core that would later gradually expand as circles in water expand when a stone falls into it. In order to accomplish both of these tasks, the only comprehensive solution was to create a human form that would have direct contact with the energy of the Christ tree. This would allow direct contact with people, without them being afraid of this being. Direct contact with the energy of Christ's tree allowed this being immense intellectual possibilities and knowledge, as well as the possibility of performing extremely high paranormal phenomena. This decision was made by the energy of the Christ tree with the full support of the unique field and the Creator himself. The real truth about the historical Jesus Christ consists in the following. In order for the child to possess exceptional, superhuman qualities and to maintain constant contact with the energy of the Christ tree, it was necessary to begin in the mother's womb without the father's spermatozoa. The newly married young woman Maria from Nazareth was chosen, who became pregnant in this way, before she was able to conceive with her husband. It is not true that the Holy Spirit announced this to Mary and her husband. The child developed like all other children until he was 4 years old, without his parents knowing that he had anything supernatural. Then young Jesus began to develop paranormal powers, which he carefully concealed, realizing that other children did not have them. When he turned 16, he left home without telling anyone. He was guided by the energy of the Christ tree, which directed him to visit the most spiritual people of that time in India, Tibet and Alexandria. In his 27th year, he was told in detail what he needed to do to win over the masses for the positive religion he was to preach. At the same time, he should have made abundant use of paranormal powers in order to attract the attention, love and awe of the then primitive world. In 4 years of this pioneering work, he managed to visit, from end to end, the entire region densely populated by Jewish and other people, mostly under the Roman Empire. Regardless of nationality, his sermons found the most fertile ground among the peoples who were in slavery, oppressed, hungry and without hope. For them, they represented the light and the only path that was acceptable. His religion was a combination of several of the most famous religions of that time. Jesus based his religion on 2 basic principles. 1. Existence of only one God. 2. Commandments on some basic criteria of behavior. There are the most important 10 commandments, the observance of which removes a large number of the most common negative thoughts that existed among people of that time and thus leads to a drastic reduction in damage to the earth's aura, and at the same time provides health to these people, inner harmony, tolerant relationships with the environment, a general positive atmosphere, reduction of causes which lead to wars which are the biggest generators of negative thoughts on earth. Christ spoke about the Creator with whose being punishment, threat or any negative action is incompatible. He was the first God in the history of mankind who did not punish, did not take revenge. Insisting on the existence of only one God allowed this whole philosophy to function well without the danger of opposing different gods and favoring believers to one or the other, which is one of the main negatives of the polytheistic system. However, initially due to the insufficient spiritual level of those who transcribed Christ's speeches, and later with the conscious intention of the hierarchy of the Christian Church, rewriting and altering of what Christ said began. Thus was gradually created a God who threatens and punishes, the devil as a threat to anyone who does not obey God's commandments, and a whole series of significant and less significant corrections that were made during the first 1,000 years intentionally or unintentionally, so that the final result would be a significant deviation of the Bible from what Christ really spoke. The lack of literacy, permanent writing material, undeveloped traffic between regions and countries and the generally low level of civilization of that time, resulted in the fact that there are practically no true historical records about the life and existence of Christ. Today, science uses only some fragments that we can partially rely on, or as proof of some current action or event related to the existence of Christ. From that handful of historical data, it is impossible to create a true picture, not only of his origin and life, but it cannot even be claimed that he existed at all. The 12 apostles, who were his main helpers, are also historical facts. 6 of them were his own brothers, whom he recruited first, because at first he could only rely on them. He did not write down his speeches himself, but it was usually done by 2 or 3 apostles, insufficiently literate, whose notes were gradually lost, either because the material was not permanent, or because the apostles kept in their heads everything that Christ said, so they paid less attention to the written document. At a certain point in the development of his philosophy or religion, a point was reached after which the existence of a living leader would lead to a serious reaction, not only of the Jewish people, but also of the Roman occupiers, which would result in retaliation, war, and the extermination of the greatest number of Christ's followers, which would lead to a complete shutdown of the movement. Therefore, the energy of Christ's tree made the decision that instead of a living leader, it is necessary to create a legend that cannot be physically destroyed, and whose action will be incomparably more efficient than the action of a living man. Jesus received information about all this as well as the necessity that his life must end. Immediately before that, his task was to enable the flow of the enormously powerful spiritual energy of the Christ tree through his body, which would perform the epical act of lowering the frequency of the Earth's aura, without changing the aura frequencies of living beings on Earth, with the aim of cleaning the Earth's aura from damage and then return it to its normal frequency. When that act was completed, the reason for the existence of the creation of Christ energy in human form ceased. This happened in the last moments of Christ's life at the crucifixion, after which he died. Seeing that bringing the Earth's aura to a normal state was done, he said, "It is finished," referring to that act, not his life. In order to mystify the legend about Christ as much as possible and confirm his claim that he is the Son of God, which he said everywhere, the day after he was taken down from the cross, his body disintegrated, dematerialized and disappeared. After his death, Christ appeared to his closest disciples, the apostles, twice more, but they only saw his figure, which they could not touch. In 2005, the luminous body of Nikola Tesla conveyed an addition to Ljubisa Stojanović regarding Jesus Christ. Today we will search for some knowledge that has not been finished and that needs to be finished. In the first place, it is about your knowledge about Christ's crucifixion, which you received as information that Christ, with his last strength, let the energy of Christ's tree pass through, which purified the Earth's aura. At the end of this work, Christ declared, "It is finished," referring to the purified aura of the earth, and not to his life. After that, he died. It is true that his heart was broken with grief, because the people for whom he had fought all his mostly turned against him. The second, which is also related to Christ, refers to his journey of 15 years, during which he met all the sages of that time, starting from Alexandria and ending in India and Tibet. Third, Christ's body dematerialized in the cave where it was buried. The fourth refers to some thoughts related to the miracles that Christ performed. Those listed in the Holy Scriptures are correct and really happened, but there were others that are not in the Holy Scriptures. So, for example, in one village, where there were several sick people, Christ asked the relatives who begged his help for healing, to carry the sick next to him, while he was sitting in the sun in the yard of a house. All the patients recovered before they reached their homes. This was the most spectacular case of healing that Christ did, but the apostles simply slipped their minds, forgot, and none of them remembered to describe this case. The last thing related to this area are Christ's relations with his mother, which were extremely good, while with his father they were reserved, at a distance, as was the rule in the behavior of people of that time in Jewish society. It is true that his brothers and mother joined the other Jewish people who attacked him at his first Reformation performance in the synagogue, and that is the same synagogue you were in. But it is not true that they wanted to kill him, they just rushed him out of the synagogue. Later, talking with his mother and brothers, he managed to explain to them the essence of his religion, and they wholeheartedly advocated for its spread, because indeed 6 of his brothers became his first apostles. There are, however, things related to Christ that you have not been introduced to until now, and which are also extremely important and represent the pillars of the future civilization of people. During his stay on earth, Christ visited a large number of the most famous sages and enlightened people of that time, in order to learn from them as much as possible, not only about paranormal phenomena, but also about how to observe the human race and how it can be helped. The result of this research was the knowledge that human possibilities are great, but that they are blocked by various causes, first of all, the easy creation of negative thoughts and the unreasonable running into numerous stresses, which further causes, as you already know, crisis hotspots, starting from individuals and through groups of people up to entire nations and all of humanity. For this reason, Christ considered it necessary to provide some energy actions for the future of humanity that will significantly reduce this negative approach of people or at least prevent some illegal phenomena from occurring. Christ envisioned setting up a large number of energy centers on Earth that would continuously emit and through their action reduce the possibility of creating negative thoughts. He started to create these centers. He created the first one in India while he was staying there, the second one in Alexandria, and the third one he intended to set up in Israel, then in Rome and some other centers of the then developed world. However, he did not physically arrive to complete this work, because things in Jerusalem began to unfold faster than he had anticipated, so he left this work unfinished. These two energy centers in India and Alexandria float approximately 500 m above the Earth's surface and continuously emit energy that, entering people's auras, slightly changes their way of thinking, directing it towards the positive. However, as the plan remained unrealized, because it predicted several more of these centers for the most developed parts of the world, Christ's energy decided that these two centers emit positive energy throughout the world, not only for narrow regions. This, of course, led to a weakening of the effects by about 100 times, because it spread to approximately that many times larger population than predicted. With the increase in the number of the population, these centers have also lost much of their influence, because now the number of people they affect has increased by several thousand times compared to what was imagined. During 2010, Energy Cloud gave Ljubisa Stojanovic some more information about Jesus Christ, which surprised him too. Namely, Christ was born on September 3, 27 BC. He died on August 8, 33 AD, and on August 11, he was resurrected. He spent 21 years in the desert in Israel. He lived in India for 8 years, where he was considered the best connoisseur and interpreter of Buddhism. And then another edition of a highly spiritually developed person related to Jesus Christ. The person who condemned Jesus and sent him to crucifixion is Pontius Pilate, an example of the greatest human deviations a person can have. It is true that the luminous body left Pontius Pilate out of shame and put him in a situation where he had no possibility of any incarnation. All his genetic descendants took on such karmic debts that already after 100 years AD he had no more descendants. On that day when Jesus was crucified, the whole cosmos wept, symbolically speaking, and many spiritual energies left and refused to help people. Pontius Pilate died exactly 1 year after the death of Jesus in the greatest torments that were associated with Jesus' suffering. His death came from his closest associates who felt that such a man should not be left alive, and after weeks and weeks of various torments and tortures, they cut his throat. When Ljubisa Stojanovic received in meditation that Jesus' heart burst with grief, it was really a moment where he, as a creation of spiritual energies, could not contain that pain, because he realized that unless humanity changes its way of thinking, only a handful of records of that human violent species will remain. Since the day of Jesus' martyrdom, many spiritual energies have kept their distance from the human race. One of them that you have already contacted is the civilization of the untouchables. Other spiritual energies are called people lovers, whose name has remained from the time before Christ's suffering. These are the energies that help in all areas of life. The suffering of Jesus is a precedent in the history of the cosmos and is considered the greatest deviation of living beings from the will of the Creator. And that is why all religions of the world have extremely large karmic liabilities due to the alteration of sacred knowledge and the truth about Jesus Christ. In other difficult moments for the human race, there was a limit for many criminals where the Creator himself left the possibility for the luminous bodies with their memory of all human deviations to pass on to future descendants a reminder of how not to live and act. The treasury of sacred knowledge thanks you for your interest, and sends you a lot of spiritual patience and love.